questions and answers.
Awesome. I love it.
You don't have to do the letter all the way out.
Yeah. Oh.
No, it's okay. Bacon or ham or something. Again.
That's saying that there's turkey.
Your bag? They're under the table. Under our table? Yeah, right there.
So Rich, is that 2 words or 1 word?
Is that my bag?
This one?
Yeah.
That's 2 words.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure I get the space in the right spot.
And I'm not going to be able to say it without looking at it. Because it's a long word.
Yes.
Tuck this in the corner here.
Yes. How you doing?
All right.
You got anything else to see people go make a trip?
Sorry about the.
No.
Those are not flies in there. Those are.
Give it a stir, and there's 2 ham hocks in there. So
Yeah.
me and
That looks
JT,
good.
me and JT got dibs on those.
Okay.
When we get to the end.
They're yours?
Yeah.
All right.
We'll see. We'll see where we get.
I guess we'll get started here, folks.
You want to do?
I'm not in charge, but we're going to get started, and then we'll explain what's going on. Nobody's in charge. All right.
Well, it's a little bit. You want me to do a reading song? Do a few songs.
Yep. This is Chief Roger Longtoe Sheehan, Elnu Abenaki tribe, which is one of the 4 state-recognized groups since 2010. Elnu was recognized in 2011. The federal government does not recognize the Abenaki people.
Not down in in the States, but Canada
In the States,
has history.
Canada does. There are people there. People are all over the place because that's what happens when history has its effects, often deleterious, not helpful. So the Abenaki people have been here for 13,000 years. They're still here. Welcome. We're here to talk with you about that today. Chief Roger, chief of the Elnu Abenaki tribe, which is here in southern Vermont, the smallest of the 4 groups. Many of us are members, citizens of that tribe, and we are headquartered in the southern part of the state. We are in partnership with Retreat Farm. It's our host here. Thank you very much, Buzz, and everyone else. I am heading up a group called Atowi, which is an outreach nonprofit to bring these stories and this awareness to everyone around us, the larger community. Most folks don't know much about this at all. Why not? That's a story. So we're here. This is the 3rd time we are hosted by Retreat Farm. It is Indigenous Peoples Day in the state of Vermont. This is the 2nd year statewide. Yes, for which we are grateful. Ndalamizi, I am grateful. We're going to open with a traditional welcome song. Greeting song.
And then a calling in song for calling the people to a gathering, calling the spirits, grandmothers and grandfathers.
Yep.
Because we're not really having a feast, but
We're having a gathering.
yeah, we're having a gathering.
We're having a gathering. You're all a part of it. So
There are many greeting songs. In the old days, I'm sure that most of the, not just Abenaki, but the Wabanaki leaders, that take in the Western Abenaki, Penobscot, Passamaquoddy, Maliseets, and Micmac people all the way up to Nova Scotia. Probably knew several greeting songs, but we're down to a few today. And so the key word that's in it is Gwando Day. And so most greeting songs are welcoming songs. If it's an Abenaki one down here, you'll hear Gwando Day in it. If it's one in Micmac country, you'll hear Gwando Day in it again. So that's one of the key words. So it's kind of a way of saying greeting, but it's we normally say kwe, kwe kwe. Some people say kwai kwai, kwe kwe. But we're all really close in the different the different nations speaking all a similar language. But so this is a Western Abenaki greeting song that we traditionally sing. Yo Gwando Day, Gwando Dani. Yo Gwando Day, Gwando hey yo yo way. I don't wanna hey yo yo way. Yo cuando de cuando dane. Yo cuando de cuando dane. I don't wanna hey yo yo way. 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 The second song is the calling in song, and this is actually a tradition. It was originally a Micmac calling in song, and when all of the tribes started to come together as the Wabanaki Confederacy, this song got spread out to all the other Wabanaki people. And so most of the Wabanaki people used some version of this song for what I'm using it for. Igo, igande, way ahead, yo yo way, one alia wandore, one alia wandore, one alia one hudana hey hey yo, de yoka, de yoka, de yoka. JT, you want to do a little spiritual? Yeah, there we go. And JT's just going to do a little bit of a bowl for the grandmothers, grandfathers, creator, the spirits that want to come and be with us. And when we have gatherings, we traditionally do this. And generally we'll have one of the younger people grab one of the kids and take them and have them go and teach them to do it. And JT, just leave it at the end of the table. Because we've, in the past, El Nu's done most of our ceremonies and things like this outside, we always put the feast bowl off to the side somewhere against a tree or you know, maybe towards the woods and stuff like that. But other Abenaki people are like, well, if this is for my grandmothers and grandfathers, I want to have it at the table, you know, with us. And eventually, you know, it'll get tossed outside anyways, probably, or in the fire or something like that. So, you know, we're changing a little bit to make other people happy sometimes, you know, when we go to other Abenaki or Wabanaki people's events and things like that. So again, nothing is truly written in stone. Everything's a little different, but it's very similar. And, you know, if we see somebody get up and make a little bowl, we know what it's about. You know, they know what it's about. So it's kind of along the same rules. Everybody's kind of working on the same path, but maybe, again, a little different. Just like the songs. If you, from singer to singer, or from group to group, nation to nation, the songs will change a little bit. But again, you kind of know the basis of the song, what that song is for, and stuff like that. So, just a little bit of history, real quick. He said that, you know, Rich was saying there are 4 state-recognized tribes in Vermont. There is actually 5 tribes altogether. There's a 5th tribe that had put its papers in for recognition, but for whatever reason, they were not accepted. All right, so there's 5 tribes in Vermont. There are at least 3 in New Hampshire, and the only ones that have reservations are the 2 provincially recognized tribes in Canada, okay, in Quebec. Originally started out as Catholic refugee communities, because the Abenaki didn't come from Canada. A lot of people think we come from Canada. We didn't. We came, our southern territory started over the border there in Massachusetts, maybe about 15, 20 miles south of the border, right? And it went up north, and we didn't start going up into Canada, near the St. Lawrence, because that was Algonquin and Montagnais country at one time. And they were not, in the very early 1600s, they weren't at peace with us, just like the Mohawks weren't at peace with us to the east. It wasn't until the French and the Jesuits actually sent back one captive out of 6 that were taken by the Algonquins and the Montagnais, and he was the only one that could make it. So, but they basically made a peace between us and the Algonquins and the Montagnais people up along the St. Lawrence River. And as time went on, we got into wars more so with in the 1650s and 60s with the Mohawk people, and they started to displace us. And we started getting pushed north, and we started going to the French, looking for guns basically, so that we could compete with the Mohawks to try and keep our land down here. And so people like the Petitioned that were further south, all the way down towards like Springfield, Mass, they moved in with us because they were getting pushed out too. Then after that, the English colonists by the King Philip's War, 1675, 76, we were getting pushed further and further and further north, so we ended up along the Canadian border. And that's how we end up on the other side of the border once a border was put in. Because you gotta remember, one time this was Canada, as far as the French Canadians were concerned. And the French government back in the early 1700s and stuff. So, all right, enough with that.
Yeah.
Let's serve up some food. And,
we will be here for 3 hours till 5. We will be available for questions and answers. We'll probably move over to the circle there.
do
And
storytelling.
do some storytelling, do some more songs if you want, answer questions. We want to make you welcome to try out these traditional dishes that we have here for sampling. Try them all out if you want. Got a number of different things. These are all made from traditional ingredients from this place before contact, with the exception of a little bit of pixia pork. We can all agree on that, right?
Yes, for folks that are vegetarian, or for religious purposes or whatever, there is pork in the soup, in the Three Sisters soup. There's really only 2 sisters that are solid anymore. The pumpkin
She decided
to dissolve, but that's okay.
In the soup.
Yes, yes.
But we also have pumpkin over here.
Yes, yes.
So that's the Three Sisters soup. What's in there?
There's hominy corn, regular like kidney bean, and then pumpkin, sweet pumpkin.
Yep.
A little bit of salt, some garlic, an onion, and pepper, and a little bit of ham and JT, what did you get near the? Can't remember. The pork.
Smoked pork ham hocks.
Yeah, ham hocks. And traditionally we would have used whatever meat we had. I'm sure they made it without meat when they didn't have meat, but I've had it and I don't like it myself with fish and eel. I'm not big on fish, but I like the meats. But I learned the stuff about this from a Mohawk lady, and I watched her cook it, the corn soup the old way, which is where you take the hominy corn and you have to cook it 3 times. So it took about a day and a half. She started early in the morning on Saturday. She wasn't done until about 2 in the afternoon on Sunday. And you boil it and you put it in a little bag, a white bag, or even an old white cotton, well, not an old cotton sock, but a clean white cotton sock in the old days. And you would put hardwood charcoal in that, okay? And what happens is the lye in there makes the shell come off the corn, okay? Because it's a very hard shell on the flint corns and the traditional old corn. And it has to almost pop. And then what you do is then you take that out, screen it with a basket, pour cold water over that, put it back into the kettle, new water, another bag, and that would be done 2-3 times. And hopefully by the third time, the corn had opened up completely and you got most of the shell out of it. Then you could add your other ingredients, your pork and things like that, or venison. And she told me, I said, why ham hocks? She said, well, she said, you know, after people got put on reservations or they lost all their land, they weren't out hunting and so forth, and a lot of people just didn't have any cash. She said the cheapest cut of meat that you could get was ham hogs, or, you know, the parts that other folks didn't want to eat. And she said it adds a lot of flavor to it, and, you know, it's got some grease, and sometimes if they're smoked and salted, it adds more flavor to the soup. So it's semi-traditional. It has its reasons why it's there. Yeah. Okay.
The culture is not static, right? Native people are not stuck in the past. They change as well, and so pork is good. Right? The pig is not native to North America. It came in with the Europeans, and so they're called in the language peaks. Where did that come from? Peaks. Pig. Peaks. Interestingly enough, in the Abenaki language, they use the plural form of the English word for these unfamiliar animals. Probably the story went something like, what do you call those weird things? They smell a little bit. Oh, those are peaks. Go home to your village. Guess what I saw today? Peaks. Show me them. There they are, peaks. Oh, there's a bunch of them. Peaksock. That's how you pluralize things in Benaki. You add AK on the end. Peaksock. One is a peaks. One cow is a cows. One horse is an ases. One sheep is an azips. But it's kind of fun. That goes both ways. We'll talk about that later. So, Three Sisters soup. The Three Sisters, squash, beans, and corn, traditionally grown together. They work together. They help each other. And they're great in the soup together, right? Corn, skamun. Say it, skamun. Skamun. Corn is native to this continent. It now feeds the world. It's from here. It has been grown here, out on those meadows, for 1,000 years. People have been here farming for a long, long time, and present for 12 to 13,000 years. People have been here. Long, long time. And now there's a lot of other people here too. So again, we want to share with you. Skamun, squash or pumpkin, is called wasawa. That's kind of fun to say, wasawa. And beans, adabakwal. Those are beans, and they're all in there. We also have corn muffins with pumpkin with cranberries.
Yes, and sunflower seeds.
Awesome. All native ingredients. We have, this is a roasted stuffed pumpkin with this really big name. Pegikeda wasawa. You heard the wasawa already. Pumpkin, squash, it's the same thing, just a different breed. Different purposes. This is an eating pumpkin, not a Halloween pumpkin. They don't taste so good. This is an eating pumpkin. It's an heirloom variety called Cinderella. I guess Cinderella is pretty traditional too in some circles. So, pegikeda wasawa and sansagha. That means stuffed. Roasted, pegikeda, roasted wasawa, squash or pumpkin. Sansagha, stuffed. What is it stuffed with? Wild rice, native to North America, which is not a rice, it's a grass. This wild rice comes from Red Lake Nation, out in the Midwest, grown and harvested by native folks out there. Turkey, turkeys are from here. I put parsnips in there because I didn't have time to get the wild carrots. Queen Anne's lace, it's a lot of work, so I use parsnips because they taste almost the same. Onion, there are many varieties of wild onion on this continent. Cranberries, native here. Hazelnuts, native here. Pork, a little bit of pork for the oil and the taste. And then some seasoning. Bayberry leaves, bayberries that grow on the coast. Taste just like bay leaves. Go figure. And they're free. So bayberry leaves, those are from Maine. I borrowed a few last time I was over there.
kind of took over for bear.
Bear.
As bear disappeared from the land.
Right.
Because
Bear has a lot of fat.
bears are very similar in many things that they do, rooting around in the ground and things like that and stuff. And they also are two of the animals that can pick up trichinosis.
Yeah, there you
And
go.
So, but nobody's gotten sick from trichinosis, I gather, in this country in 150 years. That's why they tell you can cook your pork not as much as they used to tell you to cook it, because people were just scared. But because it's mostly being raised in farms now. It's something to do with them snorting around in the ground, and bears do the same thing. So when there's bears and pigs, they often compete for the same food and stuff like
Omnivores. Yeah.
that. Yes.
Yep. Also, what else? There's a little bit of sage in there, salt and pepper. And I've got it cut up here. There's a knife. You trust yourself? Want to use this one up? Feel free to cut into that one. Eat the pumpkin. It falls right off of the skin. Eat the pumpkin with the stuffing, and I think you'll enjoy that.
You don't want to eat the skin.
Don't eat the skin. Well, you can if you want.
But
My dog likes it.
yeah.
Pumpkin's good for dogs. And over here, this is blueberry corn mush. It's like a porridge. I call that sata mzikutal. Sata are blueberries, and mzikutal is boiled corn that has expanded. So that's cornmeal, water, walnut milk. You just take nuts, smush them up, add water to it, and you make a nut milk. That was used around here a lot. Mothers would use that to feed their babies. If you were short on breast milk, nut milk is really good. Maple syrup, of course. Maple syrup is from here.
Eat sop without maple syrup.
What's that?
I said you don't ever eat sop without maple syrup.
That's right. That's right. And dried blueberries from here, sata. So check that out. That's good for breakfast and it's good for dessert. There are bowls, there are spoons. We have some guest dishes that came in with.
They're right there, Rich.
Yeah, I know they're here. The
No,
people.
the ladies.
Oh,
Ladies.
would you explain what this is?
This is a sister salmon, not from the Connecticut, unfortunately, from off the coast of South America. Traveled a long way to offer herself for us today, and the rosemary comes from our garden.
Woody, thank you.
My
Salmon.
pleasure.
Salmon did come in here for thousands and thousands of years. They no longer do because dams have stopped a whole lot of things, including the salmon. But salmon is very, very important to the people from here. And we have some bread here also. What kind of bread is this?
It's whole wheat and rye.
Whole wheat and rye. This is another guest food. It's traditional in Europe to bring bread when you're visiting. So you're all welcome. Check it out. There you go. Over here we have Chief Roger. You already met him. JT is the councilman for the tribe. Linda, Roger's wife and partner. That's my son Gavin over there. With the what color hair is that these days?
I don't know.
He's I said he's doing a reverse corn mother here.
He's a reverse corn mother. Maybe you'll hear the story about that later.
Maybe
And
we'll tell that story.
Snapper is over there carving spoons. You gotta have something to eat with, right? So these two tables are covered with work by both Roger and Linda, traditional crafts, weapons, ornamentation. Linda is doing some beading. What are you doing there?
Wampum.
Yes, wampum beading.
Yep.
And she has some little hand games for the kids to check out if they want. The hoop on the stick,
Spearing the moose.
spearing the moose.
Yes, that's what it's called. That's one name for it.
That's all over the world. Of
Yeah.
course, we have our version here as well. So-
Eye and coordination, hand coordination,
Yeah.
to get you, because at some point you're going to go out and probably be actually doing some spearing of things, traditionally. What's that?
You don't need batteries. And you don't need a couch to sit on or a controller. Go figure. So keep yourself busy and serve you well later in life. Hand-eye coordination. So, who else? Did I miss anybody from the tribe today?
No?
No? And
We're not gonna have lunch with
I'll
us.
introduce myself. In the language that comes from this land, Western Abenaki or Western Abenaki, Alnomba Odwa Wongan, the thing that the people use to talk to each other. The Alnomba are the people, that is what we call ourselves. Abenaki is a name put on by somebody else. The people, Alnomba Odwa, to talk, Wongan, the thing. So it's the thing that we use to talk to each other. That's how the language works. You take little words and you put them together, you make a sentence in one word. So I say to you today, kwai kwai or kwe kwe, nidombak, hello my friends, and delewizi, litz, and iwantastagak, uzisokwaki. My name is Rich or Lisal. We don't use R's in Abenaki, so everything turns to an L. Lisal, Richard, and I am this place. I am of this place. Wantastagak is the traditional name for this place. We call Brattleboro now. Everybody knows it as Brattleboro. Very few people know it as Wantastagak, but it has been Wantastagak for a really long time. And it still is. That didn't go away. The people did not go away. All our relations, whether we eat them or we use them for other purposes, they're all still here. Salmon is not here, but we remember them. They're still here in a way. Maybe they'll come back. Ulipayo Sokwakik Indakina, welcome to Sakoki country in our homeland. Indakina, our land. Enjoy yourself. We'll be around for a while and whatever. Oh, yes. Mitsida, let's eat. Mitsida. No, it's self-serve. Thank you for bringing that.
My pleasure.
Hi, Tom.
There you go. By adding water to it.
Cool. I'm curious also, like in Hebrew, the roots of these words, right? So word for seed kind of
Yeah. They mean more than one thing at once. Yeah. When you're eating, you're also doing other things at the same time. Butternut is called white walnut. Chestnuts, and they're gone. Chestnuts would have been used
Yeah, I know, but that wasn't anything. Just like a lot of
No, I'm not in line. Sorry.
librarian.
I have had.
how to announce that. How about we'll break that idea out?
Well, I have had a very.
And just put it there by the table. Thank you, Adina.
They were like.
Oh, yeah. President Biden did declare it. I made an executive executive proclamation, which has effect this year only. That's how executive proclamations work. And he also maintained Columbus Day at the same time. He plays both sides all the time. That's what Biden does.
I just read the fact.
But that's the first time a president has done that. Yeah.
Brattleboro.
She actually really
Came in 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just like,
Because they were trying to remember that the select one.
oh, I
They
see the
thought it was
quantum,
right.
like quantum
I thought
thing.
5 or 6 years ago, 15 or 16.
Yeah.
I have to be in front of my computer to remember that. We did it here in Brattleboro first, as a town. Marlboro did it the same year, because they're a lot smaller and more nimble. They got it passed through their town meeting just before ours. We have representative town meeting, which is delayed. So it took a little bit longer, whatever it is, 2 weeks longer. And it passed in Brattleboro unanimously at RTM. And then I asked
May I help you?
Governor Peter Shumlin at the time to
Okay. We found a
take
place
a
that was
similar
close by.
action and do an executive proclamation, which he did the next year, which I think was in 16. And then Governor Scott renewed that 2 years in a row, which brought us up to 16, 17, 18, and then, or 19, I might be off a year here.
I could check.
Yeah, and then the legislature passed it and made it statewide and permanent, not an annual proclamation, 2 years ago.
Is that salmon, Becky?
I think maybe 3 years ago.
Is that
It was 2. Again, don't quote me on the digits.
Yeah, I'll check.
But it is a permanent deal here now. Yeah. So Vermont is making some progress on this in this conversation, this dialogue. We're still in the early stages.
Yeah. And I think this kind of event almost brings it a step forward.
This makes it real. It's people being face to face, and learning from each other, not just a declaration or symbolic. Something being symbolic. It's real. It's lived.
Have to try this just for fun. I've never had something like that before.
Is this the same thing?
It's the same thing as those, yeah.
But I shouldn't open it yet. I should use that one.
Yes. It's roasted stuffed pumpkin, and it's wild rice.
Yeah, she's gonna be on campus tomorrow, so I get to see her.
I'm such a lazy baker.
Winds all around.
Hi, my name is Linda Wonto Sheehan. I live in Jamaica, Vermont. I'm also known as Wampum Woman, and I live El New, Abenaki. And this is my husband and I, our crafts that we do. And we do a lot of living history and teaching Abenaki things, and we love doing it. So thank you. Yeah, history. We do a lot of Native history.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Okay, it's so beautiful. And it's like this piece right here. Oh my God, I love it. And
Can
this
you tell
is,
me more about that?
see? This is a spiral. That's energy that goes in and out. And so it's like when you're wearing it, it just makes you feel really, really good. And all these beads are hand done. So it's really, really beautiful. Now, I did not make the beads itself. I bought them, but they are beautiful.
I can see them.
And they didn't make your, they didn't sue anybody that was speaking. So, Anybody they call
This is my own design.
sold off as slaves to the communities. All the men were, some were
Super spy.
And then they go on like
that was
that.
brutal. People don't realize that. We were like the first line of the
And then it takes patience, but I learned how to tie it myself. And I teach people how to tie them. And
and she reached out to my daughter and she said something to her about I was looking up on
there we go.
Facebook.
So it's tied and it's nice. But the quahog, the wampum, which has been around for hundreds of years, that they used to use the blue beads for 3 cents, and they used to use the white ones for 1 penny. And that's how they would trade. And then it became very important. We made message belts, and we did all kinds of things like that. And then I make belts, but I do what they did in the old way. I talk to them and sing to them like my ancestors. And you can do all kinds of stuff with it. So, yeah. And the leather is brain tanned leather, deer hide, that I used to make myself. And I'm getting back into it slowly.
Quick. My name is Snapper Petta, and I'm from Central New York State. And I'm here today doing spoon carving and talking a little bit about use of wood for making canoe cups, ladles, and spoons that might have been used historically, but still can be used today.
Can you tell me a little bit about?
What I have here is I have a yellow birch ladle, and this wood is called spalted wood. It's actually a fungus in the wood, but that's what gives it the very distinct grain look and coloration. And this has been made to be a ladle for soups. I also have over here what's called a canoe noggin, or a cup. Long before metal was part of native heritage and culture, they would use wood for different things and clay. Well, this is something you would actually, this little toggle is so I can put it in my sash, have it with me when I want to drink water. I can dip into the lake, because lakes were still pure at that time, get my water, put it back in, and be on my way. And then I also have 2 spoons that I brought, and this spoon is made from cedar, and this spoon is made from apple wood. So this is probably not something that historically would have been around. Apple trees existed, but that's more of a 19th century Johnny Appleseed spreading across the world sort of thing. But cedar would have been here, and cedar would have been used, maple would have been used, cherry would have been used. Those woods all would have been workable for spoons. I just use a little pocket knife. This actually is a French pocket knife, and this style of knife has been around since the 17th century, so it's well known. And then I've got various crooked knives that I can use to clean out the bowls of the ladles or the bowls of the spoon. And then I even have a modern version. This little, it's called a scorp, but there's a little cutting edge in there, and that allows me to cut out and clean out the spoons quite easily. When I'm done, I can either give them a little sanding or I can leave them rough, but I'm going to finish them off with olive oil. Back again in the 17th century, 18th century, olive oil was called sweet oil, so it was something that would have been available, and I just put coats of oil on the wood, let it dry and seep in, and I do that until it stops absorbing the oil.
That's beautiful, thank you.
You're welcome.
We are
I'm developing a little bit of a technique. I'm like doing it like gentle and exactly what
We got a team.
Thank you very much.
I know it is.
And Dr. Gui, you're welcome.
And I find for me, like the more
based on everything that happened, did her anybody and I can't but yes, they so for them they had their Jewish, they just
maybe she didn't trust him. I mean, big changes make it hard to accept and welcome it.
Yeah.
Especially if they're that kind of energy. That's like really. Saturday.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so glad to hear that. I work with a lot of poor folk in Vermont. Most of them.
And I like doing that. I love having different kinds of things in it. But I also like the fish scales too. And this is also copper.
So the fish scale is the white part in the middle?
Yeah, you can see that.
Champlain came down Lake Champlain, and he got involved in a war he probably should have stayed out of with the Montagnier and the Algonquins and the Hurons, and he killed 3 chiefs somewhere down. Some people say it was near Crown Point, others say it was down where Ticonderoga is. And the Mohawk never forgot that, and it was a big defeat for the Mohawk. And so in 1609, that turned into almost a 100-year war with the Mohawk and their relatives in central New York. Right? And they're expanding, getting bigger, constantly making a problem for the French, going up, raiding Quebec, Montreal, raiding Three Rivers all the time. And so the French were going around. They actually sent envoys along the coast, trying to talk the English to make an alliance with them against the Mohawk. Tried to come up the river, and they made as far as Springfield. And they must have had some Sakotis down there talking to them, because they were talking to us to try to get us involved. So they were trying to make this great big alliance, and they were also talking to the Dutch. The Dutch were like, "Get out of here, man! These guys are our trading partners." It's like they're bringing in the furs. We don't care. Yeah, they're furs from everybody else. So by 1650, they had taken out their competition north and south of them. And that's when they turned their eye towards the east. Even though they had been in previous wars with Mohicans, Tumtucks, Sakotis, and Pennacook, they really started coming here in force. And the trader and big landowner and buyer of the land, the Kinchers down in Springfield, had a lucrative trading business going on with all the different natives. He seemed to have a finger in the Mohawk, pointing the Mohawk in the right direction as is where he wanted them to go, because he had his eye on all of our land up here, from Springfield all the way up to basically Northfield. And we ended up getting more so into it. So what ends up happening is the Petumtuck got attacked, their village, their fortifications were destroyed down to Deerfield. They moved in with the Sakokis, and they built a fort at Hinsdale, right across from where the Vernon Dam is. That peninsula of land on the other side is a really important place, besides it being a major fishing place. Because kind of waterfalls there, and the water gets really narrow, and the fish would get stuck, when they came up, in thousands of them, they'd get backed up there, and it was a good fishing place. What's neat about the Sakoki Fort in Hinsdale is it's a datable fort. We know that they were there for 2 years, and 2 years in a row the Mohawk came and tried to burn the place down. So in 1664 and 63, 64. And after that, they decided that they were never going to get left alone. So in that fort, we know, again, because it was written documents by the English and the Dutch were writing stuff. There were Sakokis, there were Petumtucks, there were some Pennacooks, and even possibly some few Nippons families there. So what they ended up doing was abandoning that place, and they actually went 60 miles south. That I didn't know that until recently. I was talking with a fellow who's an archaeologist, and told me that. He said, he says, we've got written accounts of them actually going all the way down south to Springfield, Mass. again, thinking that if they lived near the English, built a fort near the English, the Mohawks would then leave them alone because they didn't want to make the English mad. And that worked to a point until the English told them to get out of here. And the English had gotten enough power, and with the Mohawk constantly attacking the people, a lot of the Sakokis and the Petumtuck people started moving. Okay. And a lot of them started moving north, looking for help from the French. And that's when you start seeing the first references to Sakoki Abenaki showing up in Quebec. It was around 1650, looking to buy guns so that they can fight the Mohawk, because the English won't sell you guns. They don't want to sell you powder. The French, they want you to become Catholic. Once you become Catholic, then they'll start talking to you about weapons and things like that. And Dutch, unless you got enough furs and things like that, they're not going to sell you. So that's when you start seeing the great movements of the Petumtucks and the Abenaki. And they start every year getting pushed further and further north. And of course, Pinson there, he's constantly trying to buy up land, and he's causing problems. He arrested two a woman, Sagamo Squaw's sons, which means Sagamo means chief, and Squaw means female. Right? And she was a woman chief, and she technically was the one who owned the land, or at least had the ability to sign it away. And so what he did was, I guess, he said that they owed him money. Basically they had traded for stuff and they had a debt. So what he did was he arrested the two sons when they went in one day to trade at the trading post, and he held them hostage until she signed away the land. So that's how this things work. Yes. Yes.
We have a special request.
What is it?
Joe.
I can try. Yes. I do.
We have a special request for a song, if you'll indulge us.
I mean, I have exactly all the words in there. I'm close enough.
Said it'll be close.
Thank you so much.
I got to think about it now. Now that I'm under the gun, I got to think about the words and stuff. Give me a day, Dominic. Away Alamalukinde, Alamalukinde, Stan, Kiku Deliga, Halu, Wula Wula, Siskamu, away, hey, away, 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 I hope that was close enough. Was it close enough? Because I don't speak the language, well, even half of my Abenaki songs I don't speak the language for either. So, but singing other folks' songs, and that's an honor song. It's kind of that's an important song. Thank you. Is there another one? I'm not going to get myself into trouble. I'm going to sing it. All right. So that's why we moved. That's why we started moving north. Some people actually went out to out towards the Hudson River to a place called Scatticook. There's two Scatticooks, one in Kent, Connecticut, which is still around as a reservation today. And then the other community was Scatticook out by Troy, New York. And what happened there was the Dutch were still in control of New York, the colony of New York. They wanted a bumper zone between their northern, the Abenakis and the Tumtucks, and and the relatives that were heading to Canada, because the alliances were changing now, things were changing, and so they said to the Mohegans, who were dropping in numbers because of just disease and other things, and they said, hey, why don't we work out a deal where you guys allow them to move to this place, Scatticook, and start a community. So all these Petumtuck and Sakokis and the Pennacooks and Nipmucks, a lot of these people that were on the Connecticut here had another place. It was almost like a release valve. So some people went over to Scatticook, and then the vast majority of people that did not want to deal with the English or the Mohawks, they started pushing towards Canada. And then King Philip's War comes about in the 1670s, 75 and 76. The people that are along the coast, like the Wampanoags, Massachusetts, Nipmuc people, that are Narragansetts, they get into the war there. They get started, and they get kind of pushed out of there, and a lot of them end up in our territories here at Turner's Falls, and some in Vernon and stuff. And after that war, but if you read the New England accounts, and I call it the Great Puritan Lies. It's like, oh, there are no Indians up there. They don't live there. It's like they come by, they never want to say who is who, because they have to go to the king and ask for grants to allow them to move further north into what was somebody else's homeland. Okay. Now the king, he doesn't like the French very much because he's English, and the French and English just don't get along with each other. One are Protestant, and the other one is Papist. So it was also between the English and the French. It wasn't just a war of land; it was also a war of religion. And of course, trying to get the Indians that stayed down, the natives that stayed down in New England, to become Christian Indians. The ones that moved north, the Jesuits and the French tried to get to become Catholic Indians and make tighter alliances. So one thing with the French is they didn't seem to have a problem marrying or having children with the local native people. And the local native people didn't seem to have a problem with it either. If it was very common for French traders, often who were already, in some cases, probably more Indian than they were French, and had, their mothers and grandmothers were native. And that's how they ended up knowing the language and stuff. But they grew up more so in the French community. It was not uncommon for them to go out to the Great Lakes or wherever they had to go for their business, and they'd have a French wife, who generally might have been a mixed blood herself, but she was more French, so wouldn't consider herself native. back at Chambly or Montreal or Quebec, and they would move, go out to the Great Lakes and go to one of the forts, and they would pick up what they called a country wife. And the women, the native people didn't seem to have a problem with it. And often might be actually a chief's daughter, because it was a prestige thing. This guy was considered important and rich, and to have him hanging out with her and her hanging out with him helped with trade, because she could speak the language, she knew the culture. There were, it's like something might went on that, somebody got peeved, and she would know about it because she knows the inside on what's going on in the politics. So she'd be like, hey, cut it out. Give them a better deal or something. And, so this way they don't come down here and burn the place. Keep them off. That's what's going on. And so you find things like little things. When you go into a trading post, there would be some tobacco left out for the men to smoke a bowl of tobacco, and a little bowl of trinkets like thimbles or shiny things that the women would like, cheap things. But it was like, those are freebies you could take. And anybody who was any good at the trade learned this, whether they were French or Indian later on, and stuff like that. So, all right. We're done with that part. What do you guys want to hear or know, or I'm good for questions. I'm also good for a story. Earlier today, you were here earlier, right, when we did talking about the food and stuff. The second song I sung was that. That was I don't know if you would call it a chant as much as a song. It's in a way it's almost a prayer that we did when I did that song, and that's known as the calling in or feast song. I'll sing another one. This is the one I sang earlier was more so the feast song before people eat and stuff. And this is the calling in song. And they both start out the same way with he goes. And again, this is people say today it's a Wabanaki song, but it originates probably mostly with the Micmac folks, and it's now used by all the different Wabanaki people when we do these different things. So this is for calling in the spirits, calling in the Creator to a gathering, and then you have the song that I had sung earlier, which is then the feast song, and it does the same thing, but there's more to it. It's meaning, this one is like, hey guys, there's something going on, come to it. And it's not just for the people, it's also for the spirits. The second song is the same thing, but it's like, now we're going to have food, we're going to eat, we're going to sit down. Because that whole thing of eating, that was one of the things that we haven't done in the past. Okay? Traditionally, when you go someplace, if it's kind of super traditional, a lot of times before anything gets done, there's food. I've been up to Atowi and other places like that, and you go in and you sit in the council house and you shoot the bull with the guys, and the ladies are in the kitchen in the back. They're making up the corn soup and some sandwiches and things like that, and no council. You don't have a council until you eat and have something to drink, because you can't think well on an empty stomach, and you can't speak well with a thirsty throat. Okay, and so that's hospitality. That's just a traditional thing that that you see a lot of times. That people come in, there's generally food and something to drink and stuff like that, and then politics happen afterwards. But again, so that's political type stuff. But then you have just when you go in someplace and there's ceremonies and things like that. It can be a little different again. Ego, Igande, Ego, Ego, Igonde, Ego, Ego, Igonde, Ego, Ego, Quando dagene, Ego, Igonde, Mondo da Jane. Oh. That's the Hawaiian song and I get her. Alright. Let's do this. Somebody's got another question?
No.
Oh, okay. What's the question? Okay. Q&A now.
Roger, could you speak to the significance of the region now up by Bellows Falls, which is now called the island, but before the island, and the significance of that region to the Abenakis?
I'll speak to, yeah, I will. And it'll also tie into this place here, that what's important about those two places. Both of these, over there with the bridges on the other side of the meadows, Route 5, about 150, 60 feet maybe, give or take, there is a panel of pictographs that are now underwater, okay? And when they built the Vernon Dam, there was no water here. This was a huge meadow for thousands of years, okay? And like I said, there were people have mentioned in the past when they come through at different times, big fields of corn growing and stuff like that out there. And it was one of the first places where the first settlers settled. They didn't settle very long because we come down and burnt the place down, took a few people and killed some. But there's reasons why we did that. We just didn't do it like Hollywood says, just for the heck of it. You know? It's like, I'm going to march maybe a couple hundred miles sometimes just for the heck of it. There's reasons. Well, there were burials out here, okay? The pictographs in both places are in places where we didn't notice until the last few years because of Annette Spaulding, who's been diving out here looking for these pictographs. And she had gotten a handwritten letter from a feller who lived here in Brattleboro over 100 years ago. And mostly she was concerned in the first paragraph with the location from the bridges to where the pictographs are, because that's what she's doing. She's looking for them. Rich seen the paperwork and he read it, and in the second paragraph it talks about a whirlpool right off of where the pictographs are. And that, that as kids they used to swim down there and one of his friends almost got sucked into it and blah, blah, blah. So he started doing some research and he finds out that there is a divide between the mountains of New Hampshire and Vermont that comes right down the Connecticut River, and right before it gets to the meadows, it turns into the meadows and goes right through that spot and then back out to the Connecticut River. So now we have, this is where I love science, tradition, history, all come together, geology. We have pictographs, we have burials on the western side. The western side of the river is where the spirits, we think, go to the west, towards the Milky Way. They're buried exactly in the same way as the people that are buried up at Bellows Falls, where there are vast burial grounds up there. Okay, and so the water probably was going down through that crack. It was a fissure, I guess. And, I'm sure the native people here would have known about it, and it would have been an important place, important thing to them, because the old traditions are that places where there are whirlpools, potholes, water is spinning and moving, and that is being caused by the underwater spirits. The underground spirits, underwater spirits. Some tradition is that it is the underwater panther, which is a spiritual being, and he sits there and he spins his tail and he makes the whirlpool, and it's like I said, it's a doorway into another world from here, a world of power. And if you're a medicine person, and you want to learn certain things, it has to do mostly with plant medicine. It could also do with being a great warrior, things like that. That's a place where you're going to want to try and connect with the underwater panther and the underwater world and try to gain strength and power. Okay. The pictures on that rock that's there is at the very bottom, because we got photographs of them so we know what they look like. Looks like snakes or eels or something. Which probably represent underwater serpents. There's a four-legged animal a little above that. That represents this world, where the four-legged animals live. And then the next world is where the thunder beings are. And there's a whole bunch of thunder beings. Okay? Thunder beings and underwater spirits don't like each other. It's like yin and yang, good and bad, up and down, and we're kind of in the middle. So now this takes you up to Bellows Falls. We have a similar situation up there. We have mass amounts of burials, even some possible mounds up there. So what's today is the island. It was not an island at one time, it was a peninsula that went out kind of into the river, and they cut a canal through to bring the water for all the different businesses and things that were running on water, mills. Now today the electricity runs on it. And when I understand where one of the power stations are now, when you cross over the bridge from where the post office is there, if you're familiar with this area, there was a mound there, a burial mound. But every time they were going around in the late early 1800s, and even after that, putting in a new road, foundations, whatever, grading the ground, they would go about this far down, they would hit the heads of all the deceased people that were there. And they were always in a sitting position. So they were not laying on their side like a lot of burials are, but sitting upwards. But again, still in the fetal position. And every time they'd hit a head, they'd dig them up, collect the bones, and then take the accoutrements in there. They'd probably end up selling them to museums or universities or something. And some of these bones, I'm sure, ended up in universities. Some of them ended up, there were so many, they ended up in people's basements and their attics. And there's one story about them actually being dumped into the plaster. They had a plaster factory down there. So when they were making plaster, they took the bones and threw them in there. So, I mean, there still could be some places in somebody's basement or attic that might actually have some Abenaki bones there. But it wasn't just the island. The island, now, again, you have the pictographs that are there. So we got pictographs down here, and we got pictographs up at Bellows Falls. Again, their faces, these round faces, some of them have horns, right? The underwater spirits always have horns. The horns are things of power. The old tradition was if the underwater spirits gave you a piece of that horn, you could do all sorts of things with it. Some traditions say you could bring back the dead, cure the sick, you could make the crops grow, right? Mica and copper are both associated with underwater spirits. I get this mixed up sometimes, but the scales, I believe it was the underwater serpents, scales were made of mica, which is the shiny reflective stone, and the underwater panther scales were made of copper. And so this tradition is not just here. This goes all the way out to the Great Lakes, where there's natural copper deposits, and the people out there believe that when they found copper, it was the scales of the underwater beings, right? So we have pictographs, we have very turbulent water up at Bellows Falls, because if you go there today, the water's really low now, and if you look around, you will see potholes all over the place. Some of them you can stand in, they're big. So obviously, if you got a pothole, that meant the water was doing this to make a pothole. It was turning the stonework, and there's a lot of them. And there may have been bigger ones at one time that are now been basically worn away. So again, we have what probably there was very turbulent water with potholes, which probably were whirlpools at one time. And now we have pictographs. Then behind that we have burial mounds. And it's not just on the island. When you go up through the town, there's a staircase that goes up to another level, because the town is built in levels, like it goes up. And there was another burial ground up there, and further back on School Road, there was reported to be more bones and burials found back there. In the 1850s, the Abenakis were coming down all the time from up north every summer, and they would fish. Normally they'd stay on the other side of the river on the Walpole side, which makes sense because one is it's kind of rocky on the Bellows Falls side for camping, plus you got this town. Might also be because those are old burial grounds. You don't want to be sleeping on the burial ground. We also know that there were older villages, you know, that were actually written about and recorded on the Walpole side, down by around the Cold River there. Many lodges. This is real early, you know, before the first settlers really were getting in there. And the first settler that did settle in there on the Cold River, he ended up building a fortified blockhouse type log cabin, and he was attacked over and over again because he probably someplace he shouldn't have been. The other thing too is right behind that area, where the Tractor Supply is there are Abenaki springs up there, and there's a road that runs back there. If you go up there, it's Abenaki Road or Abenaki Spring Road.
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't know this until I talked to a feller who actually family owned the land, and he definitely didn't like archaeologists and stuff. That, you know, I mentioned, hey, I can bring some people up there, and he was like, and after that, you know, he stopped talking to me about stuff. But, and you know, and there's a series of little ponds and things that probably that water is coming down from. And in the 1850s, when Bellows Falls was a pretty busy place, you know, tourists coming up and stuff, they would go up there and they had like baths, mineral spring baths or something for the rich folks to go up there and sit in the water and stuff. So there's a lot of stuff going on. Well, now you can believe this stuff or you don't have to believe this stuff. There have always been stories of people working in the mills talking about the Indian ghost that walked through the floors of the mills on the island. All right? And this is all, it's written, other people have told me the stories. I talked to one feller whose his dad ran the paper mill, the Robinson paper mill. He was a manager there, and his uncle was a manager in the other mill. Now there's a radio station there, I think, and some other stuff going on. And I said to him, I said, "You know anything about the ghosts in there, the Indian ghosts?" He's like, "Oh yeah, man." He said, "My uncle told me," he says, "around 3 o'clock in the morning," he says, "all hell broke loose at this place." And he says, "and they'd see them walking through the floors and stuff." So, more recently, a couple, 6 months ago, maybe, the Robinson Mill was torn down, and now it's just a big field. And we had a little bit to say about that because they were like, "Oh, this is all disturbed soil. There's no archaeological native evidence here. You know, we don't have to worry about any of this stuff." So they took great measurements, the archaeologists that came in that were hired, of the building, and you know, pictures and all sorts of things about the building, but they never wanted to look in the ground because they don't want to find things, you know. And the brother of the guy who told me about the ghost, he had written back into the newspapers, local newspapers, saying, as kids, my dad worked there. He said every time they dug a trench in the very tight, like sand, you know, he said you could actually dig tunnels through it. He said they were giving us the artifacts. So obviously the stuff is still on the coast. But he'll say, my wife's friend runs a small business making kimchi, and one of the factories across the street from there has been turned into like several kitchens for micro businesses. And she told my wife Linda about some strange things she sees, and she said, "Oh, you're gonna have to talk to Raj, you know, let him know about this." And so she came over one night and we sat down, and I said, "Okay," I said, "so what did you see?" I hear you seen some ghosts, and she's like, "Yeah." I said, "What happened?" I said, "Well, it was getting towards late in the day, you know, towards the evening," and she says, I was taking the dog out for a walk, and I was sitting out there, and right across the street is the big empty lot now with the sign, you know, renewal, all this other stuff that they're going to do with the land." And she said, I turned around, and there was a guy kind of moving across the grass, but he was halfway in the ground. And I says to her, what he looked like. And she said, it was an Indian, she said. I said, how do you know he was an Indian? She said, well, he looked like an Indian, and she said, he had no shirt on. And I was like, and she said, he had on a weird, like, headdress. All right, so I'm like, oh, here it comes now, the big feather headdress, you know? And she's like, well, I said, big, I looked at her and said, what kind of headdress? And she says, it wasn't really a headdress. She says, let me change. She says, a hairstyle. And I said, all right, what kind of hairstyle was it? She said, his hair was cut back. She said, not like yours, it was more back here and then long, and he didn't have the crest on the top. And the whole top of his head was painted red. All right? That is about as traditional as you can get for an Abenaki man in this area. 1,000 years ago, 500 years ago, even right throughout the Revolutionary War. Okay, the shaving of the head it tends to be a warrior thing. Your whole tradition is that our soul is not in our heart like it is in Christianity. Our soul is in our head. Okay, and your hair is connected to your soul. This is where scalping, headhunting comes from. Much older than people want to think about it to be. But the red paint worn on the head, worn over the scalp lock by you're sometimes wearing the roach, the red hair ornaments and things like that. That's protection. That's to keep bad things from getting in. Wearing it on your head and around this area, that soft spot there is a doorway to your soul. Okay? So your hair is your outward showing the condition of your soul. When you're very young, you have very little hair. As you get older, your hair gets longer, you get stronger. Okay? Eventually, as you get way older, your hair starts to turn white, start to get weaker. And in some cases, not many Native people, but some Native people, the hair falls out. There's an Abenaki tradition, and it's not just Abenaki, other tribes, nations believe this too, or have stories of it. When a child is born, that soft spot there in their head, you see them at nighttime, and they're in the crib or in their bed, and they're giggling, and they're smiling, and they're sleeping. That's because they're with Tabeldak, the creator, with all the grandmothers and the grandfathers in Spenki, in the spirit world, and they're hanging out because so that hardens up. Their soul is not locked in your body. Okay, so it's really important that all the people treat the kid well, especially the aunties. Keep an eye on them and stuff. There's among many tribes, and I'm sure we had it, but I think we've lost it. There is a Micmac song that we use today for grand entry to call the people into the dance. Okay? Well, that song wasn't originally for adults. That song was meant for the kids to call them out, because most of the tradition was that a child shouldn't be touching the outside ground until the time that starts to harden up. And that's around when they become 2 years old. Okay? And so that song is probably for that ceremony. I know that the Cree up in Hudson Bay and places like that, up until recently, still did that ceremony. They get all the kids around the same age, and they dance them outside, and they come outside, they have a big ceremony, and and then they go back in. But again, it's I seen this in a video about from the 70s and 80s, so I don't know if they're still doing it. But it's just interesting because for the longest time I knew the song, and we sang it at powwows and grand entries and things like that. And I'm sitting down with a fellow named Tom Beck, who's a medicine guy. And Tom trained under an old Micmac elder medicine guy. And we're talking about the song. He says, yeah, he says, but they're revamped. All the songs are revamped. I said, what do you mean? He said, you know that grand entry song? I said, yeah. He said, that song was used for when the kids come dance. They dance the kids out of the lodge and introduce them properly, and into the nation and the tribe and stuff like that. And I was like, yeah, okay. And it's just, this is one of those things that, and I always say this, 520 plus years, we had this beautiful puzzle of our world. And it was all nice and tight and taped together in the back. And it was what our people, our ancestors knew that. And folks came across the ocean. And that puzzle, somebody ripped the puzzle off the wall and threw all the pieces all over the place, And we still have chunks of that puzzle. Depends on the family, depends on the tribe, family traditions. Some tribes have a way lot of that tradition, others don't. Because, again, depending on how early your people, and we got nailed pretty early, at least in 16 maybe. Well, Cartier came in 1532 up to St. Lawrence. So that would have been right north of us, our traditional territories. And there were people up there called the St. Lawrence Iroquois around Montreal, going from Quebec to Montreal. And by 1602, when Champlain comes back and starts settling around Nova Scotia and starts working his way up St. Lawrence, they're not there anymore. Now there's Algonquin peoples, who were hunter-gatherer people at that time, Montagnais, which are more east of them, and Nipissings, which are a little bit more west of them. Those are the people that the French start noticing and talking with, and there's a thing written in the Jesuit Relations. The Jesuits were nutcase keepers of writing things down, okay? And so there's 87 volumes of this stuff that they wrote for a couple hundred years. And it was bestsellers back in France. And all these people were just reading this stuff. But it's not just about natives. When you look through this stuff, you might look through 150 pages and come across things on natives, and then little bits and pieces in other places. It's tons of stuff. And it mentioned about a couple of Jesuits who were sitting there with some Algonquin chiefs, and I believe they were looking up towards Montreal, where the city was, or and the town at the time. And they were out on an island, and the Algonquin chiefs were like, yeah, all this land here was the land our father's time. It was not Algonquin land. It was this other people's land, but we're all related to it. And they were like, what are you talking about? And they said, well, there was what would probably be the St. Lawrence Iroquois. After Cartier, they got very sick. Okay, so Cartier and his guys probably dropped off a little bug or something. And another Iroquois group to the west of them, from Georgian Bay, the Hurons, had a war with them. Now we know that the Wabanaki people were also at war with them because we have old traditions of this stuff. And so he said that between the disease and the Hurons and probably the other tribes attacking and stuff, they broke up the St. Lawrence Iroquois Confederacy, and these tribes basically disappeared. And he said, well, where did these people go? The refugees, the leftovers. He said the Hurons took many of them back and probably adopted them, or maybe enslaved them. But Indian and slavery it only lasts generally a generation, because you eventually married in and your kids, them and afterwards would not be slaves. And he said that some of them went north and joined the Algonquins and the Montagnais and the Nispi. Some went to the southeast and joined all the different Wabanaki peoples, and some went towards the southeast, southwest, into what would be like Mohawk and Iroquois country. And that's standard. People, I love when governments, or you get the news, it's like the last Abenaki or last this or something, that the last speaker of this now is extinct. It's like they're not extinct. Not everybody just disappears. You move into the next community that will take you in, and so
hanging out with the extinct Niantic.
Yes, exactly. What, 2 weeks ago? Yeah. The Niantic, everybody would tell you the Niantic, they're extinct. Well, their descendants are not gone. They just don't have recognition anymore. Their land was sold, their reservation was sold. People were moving away because they needed jobs, you know. But the people, the descendants are still around, and they're trying to bring themselves back together again. It's funny because I was down there 22 years ago, and we were doing a living history event down in Lyme, Connecticut, and we were doing 17th century natives, you know, the way it would have been dressed. You know, everybody was an Abenaki that was there. That was at least with our group. And 3 guys come in and they look black, okay? And we were like, oh, this is interesting. A couple of them had leather jackets, like white jackets. And then they walking up, they were like, you know, start talking with us and stuff. They're like, yeah, we're Niantic descendants. We're the people of this area. We're like, oh, cool. You know, so we sat down, and that night they came in. We had a small feast, and you know, hung out with us and ate and stuff. And went down there 2 weeks ago, and his name was Jim. Jim, yeah. Jim was the guy, big guy with the leather jacket, and he took pictures of us. And he's like showing us all the pictures, and I was like, I'm like, holy cow, man! It's, you know, that's my brother, and that's my, you know, my nephew, and that's my cousin, you know, and all these other guys stuff. But it's just strange how things come back around and stuff. But these guys, we didn't have a hang up with them. They're not there. They're not a recognized tribe. At that point, we weren't recognized either, you know, because it was 22 years ago. So we didn't have a stick out our box, basically, about them being recognized federal, not federal, whatever. And you find a lot of that now. There's a lot of what we call lateral violence. People are, you know, I'm a better Indian than you are for whatever reason. You know, I got a federal card, I got a state card. You don't have a card. It's, you know, so, and then you have that. That's just, it's, I always say, it's not lollipops and lithium Indian country. You know, we got our internal Indian politics, which is the same as everywhere else. But that's what it is. All right, so.
It's 5 o'clock.
It's 5 o'clock already?
Yeah.
Nope, it's not that. I'm up. If you guys want to talk more or tell you a story or something, I'm up for it. So you guys ain't moving, so I guess until the Sagamo Squaw over here tells me I gotta go, pack up, I'm good. You know? Everybody calls me the chief, and I'm like, yeah, we'll talk to her. Yeah, I may deal with the politics, but can I actually go and hang out and go to the meeting? So I got to go talk with her first. So, yeah, it's the same way. But you guys want to do more questions, or you want to hear a story? This story is related to here, and I've been telling this story a lot lately because I like to see. Where you're sitting right now, 12,000 years ago, would have been under ice. 15 maybe? Yeah. All right, would have been under mile ice or whatever. When that ice all started to melt and recede back up, back up towards Canada and stuff, it turned into water, and that water started coming down. Well, so this is a story where geology and tradition come together, which they generally don't often. So there was a dam that was built by the glaciers about midway down in Connecticut of debris from the glacier. But when it receded and the water started coming down, it turned this whole area into a lake. So we'd be sitting under, I don't know, 100, 200 feet of water right now. And that was called Lake Hitchcock. Very big lake. It ran all the way from central Connecticut all the way to the Canadian border, and from here to Keene. I know this because they got a site over there in Keene where they put in a middle school, and when they had to put in middle school, they had to do an archaeological excavation to see what's out there before they could put things in. This guy found a site that's at least 11,000 years old. So we know people were living out on the end of the lake at one point. Well, so how the story goes is, the traditional end of it is that after the ice left and the water came down, a giant beaver had come down with the water from the north. And it built that dam across the Connecticut, Juanito. And this beaver was the size of a small mountain. And it was very jealous of its pond, its beaver pond. And it would go around and patrol it all the time. Well, of course, what does a beaver live on? It lives on trees and the bark and the leaves and so forth, because it eats the outer bark, and then it uses the material to build its dams and its house and stuff. And so in the process, this beaver was destroying everything hundreds of miles up and down the river to make its food and to make its, its den and this huge dam that it had to keep repairing all the time. My buddy used to say, if a beaver can hear the sound of running water at night, it cannot go to sleep. There's some truth to this. They're psychos. and they're amazing bulldozers too, because half of what they do is mud. And so they make something that was, well, with the dam, it may be this deep with water, but then they push all the dirt and the mud, and you got a 10-foot hole now that they can swim around in. Right? So what was happening was the beaver was going around destroying everything around it, cutting down all the trees for miles in every direction. And the animals that would go down to drink, the beaver would sneak up on them and kill them, flatten them with its tail. Or it was people that did the same thing to them. So the people started praying and basically complaining to Hobblemaw, which was the spirit demon. Now, we have a word for our language, Hobbledock, means to make it, the one who made it. And I sometimes wonder if, because this is a Tumtuck story, Tumtucks may have had a little bit of a different dialect. And so Hobblemock and Hobbledock may have meant the same thing. We're not sure. But so needless to say, Hobblemock was just their great spirit. And the trees started crying because of all the trees that were being killed and all of the animals. And so eventually Hobblemock heard their prayers and came down to the earth. And it came to the people, the trees, and the animal people in the form of a human, a normal human. And sat and listened to the trees and talked to them. And the animals came and spoke to them and the people. And they basically all said the same thing. This monster beaver is just killing everybody. It's killing everything. It won't let us drink. We have all this water. We can't go near it. Can't fish it. Can't do anything. And Hobblemock said to him, he said, well, we'll try and talk with this great beaver and change his mind. And so he walked down to where the dam was, and he walked out on the dam. This thing was several miles across. So he got out to the center of it, and he started yelling as loud as he could. And it took the beaver some time, but eventually he showed up. He came up out of the water, his head, he kind of swam up, and he got up and looked at the Hobblemock, and he said to him, he says, what do you want? He says, don't you know, he says, I kill everything that comes near my water by my pond. And Hobblemock said, yeah, that's a problem. You need to stop it, and you need to share. Let the animals and the people come here. Take it easy on all the trees. You don't have to build as much stuff as you do. And of course the beaver got mad and was real arrogant, and he swung around and tried to flatten his tail, which they will do. They'll try to bite you and they'll try to smack you with their tails. And Hobblemock dodged it and ran off the dam towards the east, and he kept going until eventually where the big trees were growing, which was quite a distance away. And his voice started getting louder, and he started to grow and grow and grow and grow until he was a giant, as big as a mountain. What would be equivalent to like a beaver would be like today to a person. And Hobblemock looked down and he said to the trees, the great oak trees that were there, he said, who among you will give yourself so that I can make a boilon, a head cracker, out of you to kill this beaver? And one of the giant oaks, one of the biggest ones, said, I'll do it. This has got to happen. It's got to stop. And so Hobblemock grabbed the tree, ripped it up out of the ground, cleaned off all the branches, and then took the ends where the roots were and snapped them off and broke them. Took the ends and ground them up a giant, well, to him it was just a rock. It was the side of a mountain, and he just ground points into the spikes that came off the roots. And some people still make war clubs like this for tourists, and all throughout the 17th, 18th, and 19th century and stuff. And if you go over to like the Passamaquoddy and the Penobscot folks, they make some some of the guys that are like beautiful artists that carve and make faces and all sorts of things. But you'll say they're still around. And so Hobble took his club, and this time walked over to the dam. It didn't take very long, it was very big. And the earth shook. And he got out there on the dam and yelled. And this time it wasn't like a human just yelling. It shook the air, And the beaver came up pretty quickly and popped his head up and realized that, wow, this guy changed, And Hobble looked down at him and he said, "Are you going to leave and do what I asked you to do?" And the beaver was like, "No," and jumped up, tried to bite Hobble in the leg, and Hobble swung his club and missed him. And the beaver turned around, started taking up the lake, and Hobble now up in the water up to his waist, chasing him. And the beaver's trying to smack him with his tail as he's getting closer. He's trying to get him with his club. Eventually, he made it up to a place not too far south of here, in the Tumtuck territory, down around a place called Sugarloaf Mountain. You guys familiar with that in Massachusetts? Sugarloaf Mountain is the beaver. It's known as the Great Beaver. Okay, Hobble caught up with him and smacked him a couple times behind the head and broke his neck. And the beaver just laid there in the water, and because he was a small mountain. And eventually, the trees grew on him, and he started to harden up and turn to stone. And to this day, a lot of the native people still know that as the Beaver Mountain, or the place where the beaver died. So that's the beaver. And so the point of the whole story is that this, like I said, where geology and tradition come together is it happened. They know it happened. They know there was a dam. There was a Great Lake there. But there was actually somebody there, a native person who has descendants today that's seen it, or a bunch of native people that's seen it, because they knew about that dam. Okay, they just put it into a way that they understood it. And then as stories go down through thousands of years, they get changed and twisted around, And so we have an actual story about this place, it's length of the river. Then, that's the Indian story. That's the native traditional story. So, but I like telling the kids around here when they hear this stuff, and they're like, you tell them you're in this area, and it's like, you'd be sitting under hundreds of feet of water, man. And they're like, really? Again, the world changes. Things constantly change. I was at an event Saturday and up north, and I had a couple of young women come up after we were singing and doing stuff, and they wanted to know about environmental stuff. What my take on environmental was. Probably didn't exactly hear what I wanted to say, because they're like, so what do you think about all this and all this stuff? And I said, our ancestors changed and adapted. I said, people today don't change or adapt. I said, if the weather gets colder, you move further away from the weather, and you learn how to live. If there was a shortage of things, you figured out how to, you might have to move somewhere else. We don't move today. We have huge, massive cities. They don't move cities, right? JT, it's our councilman who's over here talking. He was talking to an Inuit guy up north, a friend of his, and he's like, yeah, man, he's like, it sucks up here. He says, it's getting so warm, things are melting. He's like, and JT says to him, he says, yeah. He says, what would your great-great-great-granddaddy have done if it got warm? Like he said, it did at different times. We just move, go follow the animals somewhere else. He says, yeah. He says, you can't carry all your crap anymore, can you? And he started laughing. He was like, yeah, we now live in houses, and we depend on electricity and oil and all these these other things, and it's just, everything has changed. This world has changed over and over and over again. And the people that learn to adapt with it and change, we're not doing that because we got too much infrastructure, we got too much crap. You're welcome, guys. Have a good night. You're welcome. Oh, thank you. Yeah.
You're still telling. Thank you.
I haven't. Let's see. Yeah, she's still taking pictures of her, so I'm still okay. The other night I come back and she was like, she had packed up most of the stuff, and I was like, she's like, you're pissed at me, ain't you? And she was just a little bit. Why? I do. She's like, it was like an hour ago when you were supposed to stop talking. I said, yeah, but I said, there was a lot of people asking me questions after I stopped talking. But I did. So this ain't COVID or anything to cough. This is I talk too much. My lips get dry all the time, and I start getting a cough, and I'm like, no.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome, guys. Hope you guys learned something. Enjoyed it. And hopefully I didn't bore you and tell you, stories in a different way than other folks tell stories. You're welcome, guys. Everybody have a good night. And like I said, we say, Ulibam Kani. Travel well.
I always take that.